Greetings. Last Tuesday, October 13th, Brother Berean aired a Facebook Live discussion between Vocab Malone, Mohammed Tanzimore, Kelly Richardson, Dante Fortson, and Brother Jay. At one point in the discussion, Vocab Malone invited Pastor Kelly Richardson to debate whether Hebrew appears on the pews at First African Baptist Church in Savannah, Georgia. Here's the relevant clip.
What I would like to do is, are you willing to debate? I'm offering you a challenge right now. Would you debate me on Berean's platform? Is the writing on those pews, is it Hebrew? I would like to offer you a challenge right now to debate me one-on-one. Is the writing on the pews in the church Hebrew? Will you do that? Yes or no?
Come on, Pastor Kelly.
I mean, again, where are we going at with that? I'm a Hebrew Israelite.
If you're going to make a video about it and say,
this is what you're taking.
Hold on, Pastor.
Can you just let us talk for a minute and exchange?
Well, I want y'all to talk one at a time. I don't mind y'all talking.
Will you debate me, yes or no?
I'm not going to debate you because I don't have to confirm myself to you. That's my point. That's the part that you're not getting. Why do I have to prove that to you? I don't have to prove who I am to you. And that's the point that you miss. I'm not going to debate you about what's on the pews. I'm not going to debate. I don't have to prove anything to you. And that's the point that you're missing. That's the point that you're missing.
Did you hear what I said? The whole pew thing was left up in the air?
Huh?
You don't think the whole pew thing was left up? I think those are two things that the community was looking for that was left up in the air. That and the whole thing with Sister Nephi and getting back with Zondervan and Minister Dante and a few things that were left up in there. Do y'all think we can ever revisit that? What is he saying?
Can I do this here?
I want to respond to that sign because he holding up a sign that says not about lineage, it's not about language, but he sure did throw his Sicilian culture in there a second ago. He threw his lineage in there.
Come on, let her go. Come on.
Can I just say this real quick? I can put up here references prior to the changes that was made. I did not throw the church under the bus. What I said in the video is that the management is under new management, but I could show you the actual websites. I could show you the original website before it was changed almost 3 years ago. I could show you even the people there in the comments that they made. So where I'm getting at is I don't have to.
No, he said no. He don't want to debate. All right, go ahead.
He said anything to this guy, and that's the point that he's missing. I don't have to prove anything to him. I have the proof.
All right. Let me first say that I personally have no intention of disparaging Kelly Richardson for declining Vocab's invitation to debate. I fully recognize that debates are not everyone's cup of tea. Debates are not for everyone. Some might prefer other forms of dialogue. That said, in all fairness, I want to ask that we be honest for a moment and acknowledge that the reaction would have likely been very different if that exchange had gone in the opposite direction. What I mean is, imagine if Kelly Richardson had challenged Vocab to debate the pews and Vocab was the one who turned the offer down. I think we can all agree that some Israelites would be out there on YouTube declaring, or Facebook or other parts of social media, declaring that Richardson, quote unquote, destroyed Vocab and, quoting verses like Proverbs 28:1, saying the wicked flee when no man pursueth. But I'm not going to do that to Kelly Richardson here, as I think that would be unfair and inappropriate. Putting that aside, Kelly Richardson seemed to think that debating whether Hebrew appears in the pews would somehow reflect negatively on his personal lineage claims. For that reason, the sign that Vocab held up provided a helpful reply, as Pastor Richardson's lineage is indeed irrelevant. It's honestly irrelevant to the question of what appears on those pews. And Vocab did not want to debate Pastor Richardson's lineage. Rather, he wanted to debate a question of language. Years ago, before any of us started exploring this question, and by us I mean myself, Faithful to God, Vocab Malone, before any of us started exploring this question of what might be on those pews, it was Richard himself who already seemed to be trying to present the pews as somehow providing something, proving something about his lineage, providing some sort of evidence about his lineage.
It's not just history, it's your history. It's my history. It is the proof that we are Hebrews. We're Hebrews.
However, we, and by we I mean again vocab, faithful, myself, we have always maintained that the pews have no relevance to anyone's lineage. Now, let me illustrate this point in a couple different ways. First, consider this simple argument. Premise 1. It is possible to believe Kelly Richardson is an Israelite and still not see any Hebrew on those pews. Premise 2. It is possible to believe Kelly Richardson is not an Israelite and still not see any Hebrew on those pews. Conclusion: Kelly Richardson's lineage is irrelevant to the question of whether there is any Hebrew on those pews. The reason why his lineage is irrelevant is because no matter what position one takes on his lineage, whether positive, negative, or agnostic, one can still reach the same conclusion regarding the pews. And that's because the question of whether discernible language appears on the pews is based on the markings themselves, whether or not they give rise to strings of characters that produce words and phrases. Those are the building blocks of language, not the lineage of anyone in proximity to those markings. That aside, secondly, if hypothetically speaking, there was discernible language on those pews, that would be irrelevant to the question about anyone's lineage, whether it be Pastor Richardson or anyone else. For a minor example to explain why the presence of discernible language, hypothetically speaking, why discernible language would be irrelevant to anyone's lineage, consider this analogy. I bet if we walked into an Ashkenazi synagogue, we might be able to find some Hebrew therein, but the presence of Hebrew in an Ashkenazi synagogue wouldn't tell us anything about the lineages of any particular congregant or visitor to that synagogue. But like I said, that's a minor example. For a more relevant example, consider that I have a video in which a hypothetical case was made for Arabic appearing in those pews. Now, that was part of a thought experiment about proper methodology. None of us were actually claiming that Arabic appears in the pews, but I will say that, honestly, in that hypothetical thought experiment, a stronger case was made for Arabic than has ever been made for Hebrew appearing in those pews. But even if one doesn't want to consider the possibility of Arabic appearing in the pews, we still have real-world examples of slaves writing in Arabic. Consider this. A Swiss historian recorded that this Arabic text, which captures the 112th chapter of the Qur'an, with a few spelling differences, was written by a slave in Haiti in 1773. So we have clear evidence of a slave who could write in Arabic. But what does that tell us about the slave's lineage, or the lineage of any other slave? For example, would Kelly Richardson say that the phenomenon of slaves in the Americas writing in Arabic would mean that those slaves descend from perhaps Ishmael? Of course he wouldn't. But if he wouldn't, that means he should recognize that an ability to write in a language tells us nothing about the lineage of the writer who has that ability. And that should be obvious. I mean, for an easy analogy in this regard, think about all the millions of people who can write in English and the diverse spectrum of lineages that they come from. And that's why the ability to write in a particular language doesn't say anything about the lineage of the writer. So, to sum up here, Kelly Richardson's lineage is irrelevant to the question of what appears in those pews. And so too, if, hypothetically speaking, some language did appear on those pews, that in turn would be irrelevant to questions about the lineage of Kelly Richardson or anyone else. As Vocab made clear in that note which he held up, he wanted to discuss language, not lineage. So too, in my previous videos on the pews, I have wanted to focus on language, not lineage. With all due respect to Pastor Kelly Richardson, it is he and some of his supporters who have imported discussion about lineage into what could have been an interesting discussion on linguistic issues. I would propose that such was inappropriate. And moreover, unfortunately, neither Pastor Richardson nor his supporters nor other proponents of the view that Hebrew appears in the pews have engaged, none of them have engaged the linguistic issues which have been raised by our various videos on the subject. Now, before closing, viewers may have noticed in that initial clip from the Brother Berean Facebook Live that Dante Fortson briefly accused Vocab Malone of inconsistently appealing to his own heritage.
Yo, I want to respond to that sign because he holding up a sign that says not about lineage, it's not about language, but he sure did throw his Sicilian culture in there a second ago. He threw his lineage in there.
So what Dante was referring to, what Dante Fortson was referring to, was something from earlier in the conversation. Here's the relevant clip of what he was referring to.
Now listen, I respect any connection family-wise you have there, but look, I'm Sicilian. I found one day when my grandma died, I found my great-grandma's recipe for sauce. I'm glad it was in English because they knew how to speak and write Sicilian. I don't. If it was in Sicilian, I would have never been able to read it. My point is, regardless of that, that doesn't mean you are able to read it. In fact, you said I can't read it. So I don't understand why you would be offended when we're just saying what you're saying. Do you see what I'm saying?
So to clarify, Dante seems to have badly misunderstood or perhaps deliberately misrepresented what Vocab was saying. Vocab's point was that his Sicilian heritage doesn't automatically make him an authority on a text which may or may not be written in the Sicilian language. And that aside, if I can expand a bit on Vocab's analogy now, I'd note that if someone claimed discernible Sicilian appeared in the markings on those pews, and a person familiar with the language said he saw no evidence in favor of that claim, Vocab coming in and declaring, quote, I'm a Sicilian, end quote, would be unhelpful. It wouldn't advance the conversation at all. And so too, if hypothetically speaking, Kelly Richardson himself turned out to be Sicilian, suppose, I know he's mentioned DNA tests, suppose he took a DNA test and it revealed that he himself has Sicilian heritage, that would not prove that discernible Sicilian appears in those pews, in the markings on those pews. So in closing, it honestly seems like Pastor Richardson might have closed the door to further discussion on the pews. I honestly hope that's not the case, as we remain interested in having a respectful dialogue on the subject with anyone interested. It could be Pastor Kelly Richardson or anyone else who's a proponent of this view that discernible Hebrew appears on the pews in that church. So if the door has been closed to further discussion, let me be the first to say that we hope the door might one day be reopened. However, if one day we do get to discuss the subject, then we should note up front that, as has been pointed out in multiple videos in the past, if someone is going to claim discernible language appears in those pews, the burden is on them to demonstrate such by actually showing strings of characters in the markings which give rise to words or phrases. With all due respect to Kelly Richardson, he's already admitted that neither he nor anyone he knows can identify any discernible language in those markings, and thus he should not expect others to simply take on faith to claim that Hebrew appears therein. On that note, I'll close here. As always, I look forward to the comments of others. God bless.
I wish I could fully read what they wrote here, and unfortunately, no one's ever has been able to decipher exactly what they say.